Messy Mondays podcast, episode number 4. I am delighted to have you on. Um,
Pleasure to be
Finally, the
here.
day has come. I have been messaging you. We will do it this day, but it is for some reason it has been getting prolonged. But here we are.
Yes, we got there eventually. We got there eventually.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, sir. I am excited for the weekend now, 3-day weekend, but I'm good.
I've taken over your Friday evening.
That's fine. It's fine. It's only one evening.
So the reason why I wanted to have you on as a guest is because you talk about certain things that not a lot of people talk about, and and uh, and that is people. Yeah, because everyone talks about the tech and how it should be implemented, the architecture, uh, cloud, AI, and whatnot. But the people who actually implement it and actually use it, not a lot of folks talk about that stuff. And you are someone who is actually um, quite vocal about all of that. So let us see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's good to be here, and it's good to be unique.
Yeah. So for the very, very few people, now this is especially applicable to you because of your presence online. But for those people who haven't seen your, uh, I personally think it's the funniest content on LinkedIn. But who the people who the people who haven't seen your reels, can you give us a little bit of background and how you started your career in manufacturing and now have become the digital marketing guru on LinkedIn, maybe?
A guru. I've never been called a guru before, but I like it. I like the ring, Mike the Guru. My background in manufacturing, well, I always will start with a story. I don't think I've done this on LinkedIn, but I talk to a lot of people, and I always say that manufacturing is in my blood, both figuratively and literally. So my granddad and my dad both owned different manufacturing companies. One was kind of specialty filling machinery, and my dad's was precision engineering. So I've always been around manufacturing. But of course, having a dad that owns a manufacturing facility, I also got to work in the facility a little bit as well. And one fine day, I'd recently got a tattoo. And just like a little bit of an idiotic move on my part was that I didn't bother to cover that tattoo up. So I went in and I was grinding metal, and the dust went straight up my t-shirt, which of course then meant I had metal embedded in my tattoo. So on that day, I both had a metal tattoo and a story for life that got born out of it. But yeah, essentially, manufacturing is in the blood, but kind of since then, had the pleasure of helping thousands of manufacturers from one-man bands to 300,000 person monoliths. And by far the greatest problem every single one of them has is just how complicated people make everything. But yeah, that's my backstory.
So very, very early on, it was kind of, decided that you're going to have your career built in manufacturing.
Much to my dad's dismay, I think he did everything to dissuade me from being involved in manufacturing. Keeping in mind that he'd had facilities that got blown up, he'd had facilities that got flooded, he'd had many, many problems throughout the years. So I think he tried to keep me away as best he could, but it never worked.
That's actually opposite of what usually happens, right? Usually your dad wants you to do exactly what he has
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, no, that was not the case. I think he did his utmost to avoid us getting into manufacturing. And yeah, that didn't really work out.
No, that's quite interesting. So you said you started working in the shop floor, getting your hands dirty, as most of the people are advised. Yeah. How did you then move into software, a thing that not a lot of manufacturers like? Yeah. How did you make that transition? Or
Well,
should I say how did you go to the other side?
I mean, it's funny because for several years, heeded my dad's advice and I moved away from manufacturing and I looked at what I could do and I went to business studies and tried to give myself the broadest approach possible. And I just found that several other industries bored me. I found myself in telecoms at one point and glass and glazing at another, and eventually kind of almost fell into software. I'll be honest. Uh, I was actually a buyer at this point. So I was buying glazing. So it was glass that I was working at the time. And I just found the role not suited to my mindset. I wanted to kind of either get into sales or something a bit more active, going out speaking to people.
Yeah.
And I applied for jobs and found myself speaking to many people. And I got a job with a company called Man and Machine. And that was doing Autodesk software. So it was reselling for Autodesk software.
Yeah.
And from there, it was working with manufacturers. It was kind of looking at things from a design point of view without really getting in past the CAM side of things.
Mhm.
And then from there, and I think we're about 10 years later now, I find myself working with some of the largest manufacturers in the world and loving every second of it.
Yeah. It's come back a full circle now.
Yeah.
So, in man and machine, you said you worked with, let's say, mostly design software, and then you also worked for some time at Dassault. Yeah, did you work for their PLM division?
No, no. So there's several different divisions within Dassault. Clearly, they've got 13 or 14 different brands. I was working for their Delmia brand, which Delmia is digital manufacturing. It's a Priso for MES. It's advanced planning and scheduling. It's supply chain operations, S&OP, all the kind of things that you'd expect from a brand that's dedicated to manufacturing. It was probably there that I really cut my teeth into working with the larger manufacturers. It was a very steep learning curve going from the design side through to enterprise, MES, and supply chain optimization.
Do you think the approach towards software is different when you're selling a design software as to whether you're selling an operation software?
Absolutely. It's night and day. I think it depends on the design software, it depends on all of those sorts of things. But I, s- it is different because you have to focus things in a completely different way. And often you're talking about very different scales of budgets that people are putting together. 9 times out of 10, a design solution is somebody's got a budget, they need to buy a 3D CAD modeling tool for X amount of people in a department. If you're then moving into like the PLM side of things, again, it's a much bigger discussion. Once you move into operations, it's much more advanced in the way that you have to deal with things because you're not just dealing with here's a standard piece of software that everybody can use.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with day-to-day problems rather than the design side doesn't have quite as much of an immediate impact on what's happening throughout the day, what's happening with their profits. It's the operations is if you do something wrong or they get this decision wrong, it's often very, very painful for the business. So they're very different discussions, very different.
Yeah, the term out of the box is not quite applicable for operation.
I think people always like to come up with new ways to make things sound simple. It's low code, no code, turnkey, out of the box, partially out of the box. There's a lot of different ways, but I don't think it really exists.
Yeah. So we will come to software, but you mentioned that you started out in manufacturing,
Uh-huh.
then you came into software. Even within software, you looked at different types of applications within the manufacturing industry. You talk about design, you talk about operations, you talk about supply chain. So that puts you, I think, in a unique position to understand the entire value chain of manufacturing. And I think for our listeners, it would be very helpful if you could map out, let's say, now again, we've had this discussion before whether to call it a value chain or supply chain or whatever you call it, right? But in your experience, right, from the number of manufacturers that you've worked with, how does a supply chain flow look like?
As you say, we've spoken about this before, and it's an interesting one because you'll get people in supply chain and they will have 4 or 5 different departments that they'll list, and it could be demand, supply, inventory. Like there's lots of different areas that they'll have. And then
Mhm.
they'll have this bit on the side called manufacturing. And then if you speak to somebody in manufacturing, they'll have production, quality, maintenance, and then this bit on the side called supply chain. And I think there's always this argument of who sits where. When you stop looking at it from a software point of view and you really just say, okay, what is supply chain? It's planning, sourcing, making, delivering, and then returning, unfortunately, if needed. But that is the high level flow of a supply chain. And for all the manufacturing folks out there, this might not be what they want to hear, but manufacturing is just a big part, but it is a part of supply chain. It's internal supply chain, if you want to call it that. But for me, the supply chain sits above, and then the manufacturing kind of does sit in the middle. But
Mhm.
there's so much that goes on around what people would typically call production that is really related to supply chain. Without really good and well mapped out supply chains, often that's where you'll find manufacturing have the biggest issues.
Yeah.
And you'll have somebody focusing on manufacturing go, oh, well, we need to improve on time delivery, or we need to improve some other metric. And they'll box out and have a look in that specific area of production. And they won't look, oh, hang on, it could have repercussions or it could be coming from supply chain. Ask
Mhm.
5 different people in any business the same question and you'll get 5 different answers.
So, 2 points that I take out from your, let's say, breakdown there is like most of the people look at manufacturing and supply chain to be some sort of a parallel activity, but wherein you're saying the entire thing, right, from procurement, sourcing, operations, delivery, and then hopefully not returns, right? So, what you're saying is manufacturing or production is a subset, and as you said, a large subset
Mhm.
of the entire supply chain. So I will be very honest. I used to call that value chain, but again, I think that is a good perspective again.
And I think in manufacturing companies in general, I think we get far too hung up on semantics. Everyone has an argument about what words mean. And I understand that everyone has to try and describe things in their words and their ways, but value chain, supply chain, however we want to call it, I think the main thing is just as long as we're actually covering all of those areas and doing something to improve them. I personally don't care what we call things.
While I do agree with you that terminology can cause some confusion sometimes, and cause people to fight over it also. But I also think, again, if you and I are talking the same language, it makes it easier to get our ideas across. So again, I think, as you said, a lot of people debate as to how important it is, but I think uh, mm, it's a tough one.
Yeah, there will definitely be people that disagree. There will definitely be people that will have a different point of view. That's fine. Talking about it is always good.
Yeah. So now that you have explained to us what, let's say, a supply chain constitutes,
Uh-huh.
then what is an SCM software and what does it do, basically? So again, going by your definition, then manufacturing operations should be part of SCM software as a subset, just by definition.
And this is exactly the thing that I mean about semantics is yes, by definition, supply chain management software should cover lots more. Typically, it's more around the plan source area rather than the make area.
Yeah.
There's it depends on the SCM solution, depending on what you're going to get, but you're definitely looking at that pre-make space. And then, of course, there is some that extend into more of the delivery side of things as well and the distribution, and they can manage the returns. Now, there is some tools that will also start going into the make side. So there's companies like Kinaxis that have now released enterprise scheduling, which definitely, I mean, you're talking about finite scheduling at that point. It's hard to say that that's not well and truly ingrained into production, but it's anything to do with planning that they're typically involved in. Now, again, Kinaxis that I know the most about is also moving into more of that supply chain execution side. And the wording supply chain management, I think, is misleading. It becomes a much bigger, broader discussion. You hinted at it there with manufacturing operations management, which is the manufacturing execution system, but with more involved in it for often the way that people are kind of looking at it. And I think
Yeah.
it's, as we've talked about before, the SCM acronym itself can be misleading, but there is a lot to these tools. And like,
But let us
yeah,
say,
sorry,
but
go ahead.
let us say, but let us say, let's try to move away from semantics. Yeah.
Mhm.
If whatever is available now in the market, right? You mentioned Kinaxis. Now that is one example, and I think, like MES, this is also a space where everybody is selling something different. But there probably is a core functionality that each SCM software has. So let's say, for our listeners, what does a core SCM software look like, and what does it do for your business?
It's all around the planning side. It's giving you visibility. For me, it's I can now see everything that's happening in my supply chain at its very basic level. That's what SCM is for me. If I was talking about MES, I'd be saying it's something completely different. It would be that it's visibility, control, synchronization across operations. SCM is very much that for supply chain visibility, control, synchronization. Does that mean? And that will be a different answer depending on what sort of planner you are, what sort of manager you are. But essentially, it is those three things for anybody in the business.
Yeah. So do you think, let's say, the need for an SCM software is, let's say, more applicable, for example, in an automotive environment, You have your seats that come in just in time, right? Also just in sequence. So having that integration with your supplier, wherein you exactly know when you're placing your order, and then you have a track of if that order is delivered or if it is going to be delayed in real time, and then you can plan for all those contingencies. How do you look at that?
I think that exactly as you've said, yes, it's important. I think for any manufacturer that is looking to understand and become more efficient with the way that they're running their business, supply chain planning, supply chain management, or however you want to refer to it, becomes a critical part. And I think historically, companies have looked at supply chain as it's a cost center. It's something that isn't actually making us any money. It's kind of something that we have to do to manage our or look at the demand. Are we getting enough supply coming in from a raw material point of view? It's a function that wasn't actually helping the business. But when you look at some of the biggest companies out there right now, I mean, taking Unilever as an example, one of their core areas of their business is supply chain. It's making sure that they're getting the most out of their suppliers. They've got complete visibility of any issues that are going on in the supply chain. Is there going to be a problem with getting the seats if you're in automotive? Do we have a backup supplier? And what are the demand signals that we're now able to look at? Because from a demand point of view, you don't want to be ordering too much. The last 5 years have been some of the most turbulent years for anybody in supply chain that I'm surprised anybody still has hair left, because you've got COVID, you've got, I mean, there was a lot, not just in COVID, but around COVID, but you've also got all of the tariffs ongoing. You've got wars that are happening. And every single industry is going to have a different idea of how they should manage inventory, how they should be managing their supply chain generally. Some people are nearshoring, some people are offshoring, some people are just trying desperately to stay afloat. And that's where supply chain tools come in. Now, me and you again have talked about this many times on LinkedIn. I think the problem that people get, whether it's supply chain or any other tool, is they look at the software, they look at the tool and go, what's everything it can do so I can make the most of it and I can make that tool do everything. And that's fine, except your problems will be different to everyone else's in some way. And you don't need everything that everyone else has. So I think, yeah, making sure that you just focus on what the outcome is actually and then pick the tool based on that is far more important.
You mentioned the political scenario. I mean, this is a tech podcast, but I don't think those are separate issues now, right? So, do you think, right, before COVID, the focus was more on going lean, having less inventory? Do you think people have now, we talked about just in time, are now people thinking just in case?
Yeah, definitely. The amount of inventory that you see in facilities now, it's like, well, we need to have this buffer in case this contract, we've got certain fees that will happen if we deliver late. So we have to make sure that that's there and we haven't got another supplier. And yeah, there's a lot of challenges that have been born out of COVID, but also the political arguments ongoing at the moment. The tariffs are changing so quickly that, I mean, people typically are looking at their supply chains every few weeks a lot of the time. The tariffs are changing every few days at points. So it's, well, you start to change based on one tariff, and then actually by 3 days later it's dropped or it's increased, or, and I think it's becoming more important people to have not so much you have to have real time data, but you have to have more information. Just you need more information about what's going on right now.
Yeah, if Twitter started licensing, it would be a good business, I think, because most of your information you can get off of Twitter for your supply chains.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there is, and of course, at some point we'll get into AI and all of these, but there is tools now that, I mean, another one can access. They're using demand AI demand sensing. So it's looking at what's happening in the market, how it could affect you. Like there's companies, not just Kinaxis, that are constantly looking at how can we give more live data. And although it is the wild west of data, social media is definitely a place that people are looking to more and more now to actually get real information. People don't trust historic legacy media in some ways because they're not sure they're getting the full story. Uh, that political side is playing much more of a bigger role in supply chains.
Yeah. So I think, Mike, the need is established. People know that it is important for them to have this visibility with all of the risk and uncertainty, right?
Yep.
Then it kind of confuses me. If that is the case and people understand the need, then why is there so much resistance? Now we talked about SCM, but that is the same for MES as well. Why is there so much resistance from people to these softwares?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't limit it to software. I definitely wouldn't limit it to software. I think there's resistance to change in just about everything, and it's often our own fault. We don't manage change well. Like there is companies that do a much better job of managing change. I don't think anybody can manage change perfectly. They can do a very good job with it. I think we assume that everybody has the same reasoning for wanting or not wanting to change something.
Yeah,
And it's really difficult to figure out exactly what each person's reasonings are. I mean, you could sit five people in a room, one person that is about to retire, one person that has just had a baby, one person that is looking to go into a senior leadership role, one person that wants to stay where they are, not change anything and do what they do and just be good at what they're doing because they're the superstar of what they do right now. And one person that made or knew about this a year before and didn't do anything about it. Those five people all have very different reasons as to what they want to do with software, with change. Some want just an easy life. Some want to make a name, but they also don't want to get the wrong thing. But there's lots of reasoning. And I think it's the biggest mistake we make with change management is that we assume change starts once we've started delivering something. So all of change management starts at this point and we go, right, we've bought this tool. Let's get everybody on board. And at that point, it's too late. It's, you haven't got people involved. You haven't got them accountable. You've bought something that may not fit their needs.
so what I see from your answer there, Mike, is that number one, the people implementing the change are different from the people who change will be implemented on, or the people that will be most affected by the change, right? And the goals, the objectives is very different for these two sets of people. That is why it is very important to consider all those things even before you start the project. That is what you're saying essentially.
Yeah. I had a conversation about this recently, and as you've just said, you've got the people implementing change, or it's their project and they're really excited about it. And then you've got the people affected by change.
Yeah.
The people implementing change will always be excited about change. They will always look at all of the positives. They'll say how amazing something's going to be. They think of all the good. On the other side, everybody will hate your idea of change. Just assuming that in a project will support change management. Now, I know that that's a very broad thing to say, but if you assume that everybody hates the thing that you're about to do, you're much more likely to find the reasons that they'll resist it. Whereas if you go into it and just tell everybody how wonderful it's going to be, everybody will just ignore you.
Because they don't feel that you understand what they are going to go through after the change is implemented.
Yeah, there's there's always fear in change. No matter what you do, it's a stressful situation. So they always say about the top three most stressful things that we do in life. And I think it's moving or buying your first house or moving house, getting married, or like a death in the family or something like that.
Yeah.
All of it, it's a huge fundamental change in your life. And no matter what area of your life, if you look at the most stressful times that you have, changing jobs, there's always change in there. We don't like change because inherently we have a fear of failure or a fear of the unknown. It's people don't like change for several different reasons, but it comes out of that. There's there's always a worry, and it's not addressed that well from what I can see.
So how should we manage it?
Oh, well, that is the most situational thing possible. Because as I said, there's people are always going to have resistance to it, but working with people is more important than any of the KPIs that you're going to possibly think of. And it's such a fluffy thing to say. And I know that it's especially in manufacturing, saying things in a fluffy way doesn't really go down too well. But you do have to sit with people individually, not just look at them as a team and go, right, that team will be happy with this because one person said that they would be. Doesn't work.
Mhm.
And because in its essence, that is not scalable. If you've got thousands of people interviewing thousands of people to understand each of their personal needs, wants, and desires, I think most manufacturers would give me some symbols that I wouldn't be too happy to receive. But it takes a lot of work to make change work. That's why I think it's something along the lines of 70 or 80% of all change projects fail. Well, it's because it's hard work. It's not quite as easy as put in a system, put in a tool, put in a machine, and everyone's happy. It takes a lot of effort, but there are simple things you can do to improve it. And one of them is just making sure that you bring people in earlier and get their ideas so they actually feel like they've had some involvement in it. No one likes being commanded, you will now use this system. Whereas if they feel that they've actually had something to do with building the system, the process, they'll actively try and make it work themselves as well.
Yeah, I think that is a very important point because let's say now from my experience involving the operators in case of MES, right? Um, the UI, it looks good when we develop it, and we as let's say software or IT people, we are making the solution, right? But when it actually goes to the shop floor, you have so many complaints, right from where the buttons are positioned, in terms of oh, we spend a lot of time going there clicking on that button. Yeah, it's not useful then, because to you it's your baby, but you don't face that problem.
No, and exactly what you've just said, especially in that operator environment, when you're testing it and you'll do some testing and you'll be up in an office and you'll be typing on a keyboard, or you might have a mouse, or even you may have a touchpad or some sort of tough pad or something like that as you're walking around, but you probably don't have the safety gloves on that they may or may not have to wear. That, and that's just one thing. You may have some other thing that you don't take into account because you don't do their job every single day. They will give you feedback that you will not be able to know. You don't know what you don't know. Designing anything for someone and their job without speaking to them is just, it's insanity.
Yeah, I have seen operators struggle to log in to the MES, and the IT people upstairs are like, what are they doing? Why are they struggling with this? Because they're on their screens and they're like, what's the problem? But on the shop floor, they're taking 3, 4, even 5 tries to basically log into the system.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, my father-in-law works at a large company that recently rolled out a human capital management system. Clearly, I won't use names of any of these businesses because of the story I'm about to tell, but
Mhm.
they rolled out a new system. They spoke to nobody about it other than, I think it was the finance team that looked after it. And this had to be used by all employees for clocking in and clocking out, booking holidays, booking overtime, all of these things. So they have to use it, and it is their money, personal money, that you are making changes to. So everyone's a little bit worried before it rolls out. Lo and behold, it gets rolled out. People aren't getting paid properly. They've not able to log things properly because the system doesn't have the right settings so that they can log it. The buttons that they actually need to press were really small, and half of the people he works for aren't the most technology savvy people. My father-in-law is definitely not, and he would happily admit it. I think he grumbles about technology at every opportunity he gets.
Yeah.
But in that instance, as a real world example, they had half of the staff at one of their sites say, we will quit if you don't sort this out. So you've got people that have essentially down tools, and you could lose half your workforce, and it's a union workforce as well, because you're messing around with people's money just because you didn't involve them and thought, oh yeah, this is a well-known system, it must be good. Not how it works.
Yeah, and you said that about being technologically sound. That is the case with most manufacturing companies and the people who work there. Yeah, you can't expect to have the same sort of technical literacy that you developing the solution have, right? So it has to be designed in that way as well. But let's say moving a little bit from, now this is UI or UX, but from a process perspective, what goes wrong? And if I had to ask Mike, if you had to chart out a path where you're, let's say, okay, you said let us not talk about software and let us talk about change in general, let's say from a enterprise project kind of perspective, what do you think should the approach be?
Hmm. So for me, the process is more important than the tool by far. I don't think I'm not one of these that thinks the technology doesn't matter, because it does. Without the technology, most of the changes that we're talking about don't work. But if you stick makeup on a pig, it doesn't make it any prettier. And it's the same with processes. So I would always say, look, understand where you are now. Deep dive what your current processes are. And I'm not talking about what it says in a book that they are. Walk around your facility, walk around the line, whatever it is. Make sure that you actually look around, because the amount of times I've walked into somewhere and they've gone, here, this is what our process looks like. There we go. Okay, let's have a walk around. And yeah,
And even they don't know what the process looks like,
yeah,
and even they're surprised during the line walk. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's happened.
And it's fascinating to see. And they go, well, you hand it to them and they kind of look at it themselves and they go, that's not supposed to, I thought it was this first. And it gets them thinking. And you, at that point, I genuinely sit there and I just think, I should not be here yet.
Yeah.
Because first you need to understand your own processes. The amount of times that you can spot really simple process improvements, no technology, no change management really needed involved. There's one company I worked for that we took out one process step, and it was that they had 3 or 4 different ways of bringing or loading raw materials into the system and from suppliers and other bits like that. But it was this fourth step required an extra, essentially half an hour to an hour of work for 5 people on the team every day. Doesn't sound that much.
Yeah.
And yes, you could probably make it quicker, but if you just remove that step and say, no, these are the only ways that we will actually accept X, Y, and Z, it saves them something like £300,000 a year. And you look at stuff like that and you think, no, it can't. But even if you're saving 15 minutes across 5 people, and you look at actually what that means to a business, you're saving so much money just in that one small little process. And you can do that yourself. You can look through and go, well, how much time does this process take? How much time does this take? Just remove what's not needed.
Mhm.
So
So
I'd
number
start
one
there.
is yeah, number one is, let's say, understanding what your current state is. That is processes and systems, solutions, whatever you have. Just take a stock of what you do as a manufacturer in that particular area. Yeah.
Yep. Understand what you do, where data is coming from, what process leads to what. Understand everything about how things are right now. And then you can go, right, now start at the other end. What are the problems? And it's not, well, loosely, what are the problems? Really sit down and go, right, okay, in this department, it's X, Y, and Z. In this department, it's X, Y, and Z. And see what all of those problems are. If there's commonalities between them, again, you're going to be able to start to spot that quite easily, why that might be happening, because you now have a full view of what's happening in your facility. You know where data is coming from, where it has to go, what its dependencies are, and what the processes actually are. But work with the people in there to actually understand what their issues are on a real day-to-day level. Don't walk in and think, let's have a look at this from a 30,000 foot view and whatever other synergies and alignments we want to talk about. Understand what their day-to-day challenges are and then map them to any business improvements, business challenges that you're facing. That's number 2.
So, so basically, involve the end users right from the problem definition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. 100%. You will already know, if you're a business leader, what the business challenges are and typically what you want to do. But understanding the day-to-day operational challenges will also let you see what could be stopping you getting to that top level improvement.
Yeah.
And I don't say things in the most advanced and clever way, because I think this is one of the other challenges in change management is that people talk in spaghetti language and it just makes no sense. And I'm sure if you're sat in a boardroom or you're sat in an office and you're sat in all of these areas and you're talking in synergies, alignments, and strategic objectives, and whatever you want to call it, it will sound wonderful to everyone else in that area. But when you're talking to people on the shop floor, 9 times out of 10, they look at you and just go, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so, in the pursuit of trying to sound clever, we completely lose the audience.
And they will catch you on that actually, and they don't feel like they're a part of whatever you're trying to tell them. Yeah, and
Yep.
that's not a nice feeling for them, and not you, because you have to deliver on the timelines no matter what.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we always look for the people that agree with us too much. That's the other thing is we all want to speak to the people that most support something, and yep, they're the ones that are really forthcoming and they're the ones that are really behind this, so they'll drive change. It's normally the opposite from what I've seen. It's the person that doesn't want to say something or is actively against the project. They're the ones you want to seek out because they're the ones that will point to the most problems. People get told, don't be too negative, don't be this, don't be that about projects. You want that. You want all of those issues because that's why the change will fail. So rather than trying to sweep it under the rug, find it early. And it's going to be the people that are affected by the change that will give you that.
Yeah, and they will sign off on your UAT quickly also.
Mm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now that you're implementing the software
Mhm.
and it is decided that this has to be done,
Yep.
and now you're at a point where you're going to deploy it, let's say, what about training? How do you make sure that all the personnel, required personnel who are going to work on this particular solution, are trained to, you know, adopt that new solution and also not actually serve the purpose of the solution and not to cause more downtime than there actually was?
What you mean? We don't just give them a 1 hour PowerPoint presentation and that's them fully trained on the system.
I am not going to say anything on that.
I'm fairly sure that is the only way that we should be training people, isn't it? Yeah. Training is much more than just exactly what I've said. And again, depends on the person, but typically you need to give people time to experience what it is. You want, if you can, bring people in to work with that team. I'm not saying that you have to, because this will sound like I'm saying, oh, bring loads of consultants in. It's not that. But you want people that understand how to use the system to show the people that know the process how to use the system best to their process. But training of any system needs to be to the point that people are happy with using it on a day-to-day basis. And you don't get that by here's a 1 hour training course. You don't get it by doing a 40-hour lessons of online learning that maybe 10% of it people are actually wanting to listen to that point, or it's about providing actual things that they will do on a day-to-day basis. So if it was me personally, I would try and build a training program that is mapped to your own internal processes. So it actually trains you how to use it in the way that you will be using it every day, not just this is how you log into the system. This is how you save a file. This is how you press a button.
Mhm.
Because although that's needed, it, it doesn't work that well. But then you need to reinforce it as well. It's something along the lines of 80% of training and things that you learn will be forgotten within 24 hours if you don't reinforce it. So training is something that is ongoing. It is not one and done. It never is.
Yeah. So one approach that I like is basically you identify people, or I call it super users, right? People who actually uh, have goodwill, let's say on both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, people who you can talk to, understand your language as well, and people who have, you know, authority and also respect within the manufacturing or the production team, right?
Uh-huh.
And that is how usually I see that's a good approach to take it. So you talked about having people in from the start. Now this is good from a perspective wherein the project is to be delivered when there's an actual problem. So you're looking at a bottom up kind of a scenario, right?
Uh-huh.
But what if this change itself is led top down? In this case, how do you manage all these challenges? Because as much as we like saying that identify the problem first, it's not usually, it's not, I wouldn't say usually, but it's not always like that, right? It's sometimes it's just the tech that's fancy and it has to come to the shop floor.
AI. Yeah. No, look, there's always going to be projects that somebody's going to say, I want this system.
Yeah.
And I think, although I disagree with it, I do understand why people do it is, oh, well, our competition's doing it, so we must. And even if everything's working beautifully, you should always look to innovate. And let's just be really, really kind and say that this is one of those innovation projects where they're trying to be forward looking and they want to implement this top down and say this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
So at that point you've decided I'm getting a system, let's say MES for a second. You've In your scenario, would you say that they've decided the actual system itself or just that a system needs to be done?
A system needs to be done.
And
I mean, how does how does that change the approach? That's interesting, actually. Yeah.
yeah, I'd say the approach always has to be fairly standard when it comes to change. Yes, there's variability within the actual process, but you always need to involve those people, whether it's them deciding to do something or mapping the challenges or not. You're still going to be speaking to those people to understand how a system needs to be used, how it's going to be most effective.
Yeah.
So involving people at that stage is always number one. Whether it's top down, bottom up, I think it's always going to be the same because all of these will be top down in some ways because it's very rare that somebody buys an MES or a supply chain tool and it hasn't gone to the top levels of the business. There is more affordable MES tools out there now that do fit within budgets, but historically you were looking at £1 million plus for an MES and you don't really have a assigned budget to operations or IT for £1 million over. So it's always got a top down element. But yeah, the process doesn't change too much from a change management point of view. And as I say, for me, it's just people. It's almost always people. If you can get the people on board, as long as you have a semi capable system, it will be more successful than any project that hasn't bothered with the people.
I am going to use that statement going forward.
You're welcome. Please do.
It's very important, yeah, because it doesn't matter, to be honest, what software you implement, and yeah, because it's most softwares. can do the job. And it's how you implement it, or how you have the software deployed is more important than what you deploy, I think. Yeah.
100%. I mean, you can go out and get an MES software tomorrow for £5,000 a month, and you'll have it implemented in 4 weeks. And that will do just as good a job, if not better in some cases, than going and spending 9 to 12 months implementing this monolith that's supposed to cover everything. It's going to cost you millions, and 4 years down the road, you're going to go, why did we even start doing this? Like,
Mm.
picking solutions based on the people and what actually needs to be done is always going to be a lot easier as well for the business, rather than sitting there and going, we just need to cover everything. It just, yeah, there's systems and tools out there now that you can move much quicker, and they're moving much quicker on MESs that are, I mean, if you've got the option between those two, I think everyone's going to pick the monthly cost that's going to get me live in 4 weeks over 9 months of implementation, because time to value is going to be much more important than what this long-term project is promising, because it's all pretend money at that point.
You coughed when you mentioned AI.
Yeah, it's just.
Mm, but I am going to take you there anyway.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
what use cases do you think are relevant for manufacturers today, with all the hype that is building up? I know you and me use it to make some content, but apart from all the enthusiasm around AI, what are some actionable use cases that manufacturers can implement today?
So, trying to remember the post that I saw recently, and I think it was Jeff Winter. Shock. Jeff puts out some really good content. Amazing that it sticks in my mind, but it was like a circle of all of these different use cases that are available in um, manufacturing.
Yeah.
And AI, I know that people say it is overhyped. It is from a marketing perspective. AI is the
Mhm.
most overhyped marketing tool out there. Everyone slapped their AI badge onto their AI magic box of AI fairy dust that you open up and it shoots out AI loveliness.
Yeah.
But when you really start to look at use cases for the shop floor, I think it's underused at the moment. And I think in terms of actual use cases that could be there, depending on who you're going to talk to. I mean, one of the use cases I was talking about the other day is augmented reality utilizing AI. Now, that sounds like a huge project, but if you imagine you've got augmented reality glasses on and you are walking around, everyone references maintenance. So I'm not going to talk about maintenance. Everyone talks
Yeah.
about it. It's one of the biggest use cases. I get it.
Yeah.
But if you've got work instructions, let's talk about a aerospace and defense manufacturer, right? They are walking around and they are sharing wads of paper about that thick from stage to stage, and they're stamping it all and saying that's what needs to be done, and you've got your list of steps that have to be done. Massive amounts of paper. With something like AI, you could have a camera above the station that is then
Yeah.
analyzing the steps that have been done and automatically reporting that this has been completed, tick, done, feeds into the MES. Great. That's one use case that, again, it doesn't sound like you're going to be saving monstrous amounts of time. But I guarantee you, if you spoke to an operator and said, you no longer need to fill in the paperwork, tick the boxes and say X, Y, and Z's been done, that'd save them at least half an hour every day. If you've got 100
Mhm.
operators or 100 engineers or 100 people that are walking around and doing the same thing, funnily enough, it starts to add up to huge, huge amounts of money. But the the capabilities of AI are constantly evolving to the point that it almost goes as far as your imagination can go when it comes to use cases, because it's getting to the point that it can do most things.
I think the important point there is that instead of looking for what can AI do for me, the question might be to ask, am I ready for AI? Do I have the data infrastructure so that whenever there is a use case that is applicable to my processes, do I have the infrastructure to actually build upon that use case, basically, right? Because AI needs data, and you talk about data. We were talking about the different topics that we can talk about, and this is also one that we were venturing into. But maybe that's for another podcast. But again, the point is point is that uh, don't just run after whatever we call it the latest toy in the market, right?
Shiny thing
Uh,
syndrome.
Tiny things in the market, basically, right? So, are you ready for? Are you even ready for the technology? So it's not like you talked about augmented reality, right? It's not that you're going to go from paper to augmented reality glasses. Yeah, it's a process.
Yep, yep.
And when the technology is there, are you ready? Basically,
AI is not the answer to everything, no matter what people say. Yes, when we talk about just use cases, there is many, and they would be great. However, and it is a very big however,
yeah,
data, yes, big part of it. Culture, we've talked about change and how that would affect people. AI is one that instills more fear in people than anything else. And also, why? People are trying to do with AI what already exists in Excel in some cases. I've seen people trying to essentially build a macro of, or something that you can do in a macro of Excel. Now, I don't recommend Excel, but they're building AI use cases for it. And I sit there, I'm like, why? Why are you building an AI for something that is already in a system or a process that you do? And it doesn't add any value. It's, oh, well, we're adding AI. It's why? Why you do? You need to start with the actual reason that you're doing these projects. Someone says do AI, pick a problem in the business and do AI on that. Pick use cases in your business, not the other way around.
yeah. I was talking to Thomas about this, Thomas Soybert, and he was saying that this is a buyer's beware market, basically, right? Even if you're getting sold AI, make sure what you're getting sold is actually AI.
Yeah, yeah. And when the other classification that we need to make is that AI is not ChatGPT. And I feel like I have to say that every time I talk about it now, because I get into conversations about AI and they go, oh, yeah, it's really good. And I'm like, it's really good. Do you mean ChatGPT? And yes, it is one of the most prominent, but that's not it. Like, that's a large language model. It's not the be all and end all of what is possible with AI.
Yeah. Mm. So, Mike, let us go to LinkedIn now. I think you're one of the most active, the most entertaining, and the most engaging content creators on LinkedIn in the
Thank you.
manufacturing space. Yeah, I have to say this so that you come back on the podcast again.
I was going to say, oh, suddenly being extremely nice to me.
So, do you think whatever, let's say, you're trying to do, or I try to do to an extent, is it even useful?
Big question, because everyone uses LinkedIn in a different way.
Yeah.
And your definition of what useful is because if everyone's honest, they don't go on LinkedIn to just teach people how to do things because they're such kind-hearted, wonderful people. Now, it's great that that is what they almost believe that they're doing, which is fine. But everyone has an ulterior motive, and
Yeah.
so when you say, do you think it's worth doing, or is it actually useful? I say yes. I think it is a very good way to build, I will say, communities, because this is proof. Right here, right now, this is proof. We are talking because of LinkedIn. There's
Yeah.
people that there's tens, if not hundreds of people now that I've spoken to on messaging, definitely on messaging, but even in person, I've spoken to and met up with a few
Mhm.
just because of LinkedIn. So building your network on LinkedIn, 100%, building that community, it is definitely
Yeah.
worth it. What we're trying to do with LinkedIn, whether it's to bring in leads to a business or whether it's trying to actually help people in manufacturing. I mean, there's people like Matt Barber that you've spoken to before. His mission is to educate the world on MES. If I'm not wrong,
Yeah.
I might be wrong on the wording exactly, but and I completely agree that it's really useful to have that out there because people are looking online much more when it comes to topics like this. So having lots of people on LinkedIn to actually help in those topics and not make it mind-numbingly boring as it has been in the past, where you've got 15-page articles about X, Y, and Z, when we live in an environment that people don't want to watch something for more than 30 seconds. So yes, it's useful. It is definitely useful. And I think it will increase in terms of its value when, as people start to use it, and it's becoming more of that content creator environment. Some people hate that, but I think that's where it will actually provide the most use.
Just a couple of hours back, I saw a person dissing LinkedIn on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
So he made he
Love,
made a
love.
post about he made a post about it, and that guy had several hundred impressions and everything.
And that
So
is simply put, it's impression baiting. Like that's all they want. They want the attention. They want their, and that's fine. Like, I've got my issues with LinkedIn. Like the people that decide their algorithms need that, they are just absolutely maddening, because on one day something will do this and then the other day it will do this. But if you're engagement hunting, that's when it's a problem. And I
yeah.
think that's, if your focus is MES and you want to talk about MES, just talk about it. If you want to do a 10-minute video, do a 10-minute video. You want to do 5, you want to do 1, you want to do 30 seconds, do it. Forget about what the algorithm's going to do with your content, because I've had videos that have done over 1 million in impressions, but have done absolutely nothing in terms of the engagement. Like, people don't
Yeah.
talk on it, they don't ask questions, or you don't actually get anything from it. But then I've
Mhm.
had videos and posts that have had hundreds of impressions, and it's the opposite. And you actually get to talk to people and they engage and they might message you in the DMs, and forget the engagement hunting. And LinkedIn becomes a lot more of a tool that you can use to build that network or even engage more with people, whether it's partners, whether it's customers, or whether it's suppliers of some sorts. It doesn't matter. It, it builds trust with the people that you're going to be working with. That's one of the main things. It's, you get to see who I am. Like, you get to
Yeah.
see the nonsense and how I speak. I'm not the most smooth, elegant person in the way that I speak. I'm not the most polished. I will speak how I speak. So you get that feeling from people. Everyone's got their own way of doing it. So I just, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's useful for everyone, and it's not just an online CV anymore.
Yeah. So my, if you would, right, my aim when I started was I didn't want to be restricted by my organization, my geography, and the limited number of people that I interact with every day on basically to understand more about MES, right? And I thought if you have this platform, a global platform that people from everywhere are on it, from all industries, experiences that you might not have the opportunity to even listen to, right? And I think it's a great, it makes knowledge more accessible in certain ways, and I like it.
I agree to a certain extent, and I think it is useful as long as you're connected. You have to actually hunt for people with that knowledge if you're going on there for that, because LinkedIn is not somewhere that people actually go hunting for information.
Yeah,
If you
I
if
agree.
you think about why you go on LinkedIn, you go on LinkedIn to either put something on there yourself, maybe scroll through from some stuff, search for somebody. Typically, you're not going on there like you would Google or some other or YouTube, where you're going to search for a specific topic. So I think there's people that do it really well, where they talk about LinkedIn is social media now. It's not all of the same things as it was before. So when you put
Mhm.
something on there, you need to get people excited. You need to get them involved and build a community around what you do. So they do actually choose to spend their time to look for you or to follow you or to, and yeah, it's not always the easiest thing when you're not comfortable with a camera, or you're worried about what you put out there. And I mean, I had so many people take the mickey out of me. I mean, I got made fun of mercilessly by family and friends for putting that stuff up there. But gradually that's changed.
Yeah.
Gradually you get better at things. And I think it is a much better way of actually getting to know people.
Mhm.
People want to see who you are a little bit before they want to talk to you sometimes. So yeah, I'd say it's definitely good.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for your time today.
My
We
pleasure.
we talked about people, how it's not about the software or the solution you're implementing, but it's actually how you implement is more important. There are so many topics that I want to talk to you about. You talk about supply chain. We touched upon a little bit in the
Uh-huh.
start, but I also want to talk to you about now with all these changes that are coming up. How do you, as a professional, keep yourself up to date? Yeah, you've made some posts on the death of the single skilled worker, and I want to explore that topic as well. So
The death of
let
single
us
skill.
set a date very soon. Before I let you go, I want you to give your feedback on this podcast in terms of how your experience was, what you would like me to change, how we can make this podcast better, and help more people going forward.
Okay. Uh, well, you need better guests to make it more engaging. You don't want this guy on here all the time. No, better internet would have helped us, I think. No, but in all seriousness,
Say only the stuff that we are allowed to keep in the podcast.
yeah, yeah. I genuinely think that the structure that you've got is good. You're bringing out things that are in there. There isn't anything that I'd improve, clearly. The only thing that I would say that would be better is if we could do it face to face, because I think face to face ones, there's always a bit more of a relaxed environment. I think all of us have got
Yeah.
very used to sitting on a camera and staring directly at a camera. And I find, yeah, just getting together and doing those things. So once you become big famous podcaster, we'll make sure that we do it face to face.
I will have you on as the first guest for my face-to-face podcast.
I like it.
Yes, yes, let's do that. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much
much
for
for
having me.
your time, and
It's been a
have
pleasure.
you get soon on the Messy Mondays podcast.
Pleasure. It's been great.